everybody, welcome to this episode of The Beer Chasers. I'm Preston, and today we're going to be tasting the S'mores Stout that we brewed in the last episode. So it's been in the bottle now for 5 months, so we're hoping that's been enough time for the cocoa nibs, the vanilla, the graham cracker to kind of infuse its way into the beer, and we're hoping we got the s'mores character nailed. So I'm not going to go through the typical review that I would do, the 1 through 5 and all the categories, just because it's kind of my homebrew, you know. So I'm going to give you like an overview of whether I think we nailed the s'mores character. But I do have a friend of mine, Matt Gillespie, who provided some feedback. I gave him one of these beers. He's not quite a BJCP judge, but he's about as close as you can get without being one. So he provided me like a BJCP sheet, and we're going to go through his feedback. And hopefully at the end of the day, we'll kind of get a good idea of whether the S'mores Stout was a success or not. So I'm ready to crack this thing open. Stick around. Check it out. Alright, the cap is off. Let's go ahead and pour the S'mores Stout and see how it looks. So far so good. Got some good carbonation there. Nothing too crazy. Nice brown carbonation. Well, it looks like the head is pretty much dissipated immediately. I'm going to blame that on some of the cocoa powder we used. I imagine it had some oils in it still, so that definitely will affect the head retention. Alright, so it looks like the pour is done here. Let me go ahead and set the camera up and we'll go live with a review. Alright, so here we are with the S'mores Stout. We just saw the pour video. Like I mentioned, the head pretty much disappeared immediately, so there was a nice little head on it when it appeared. You know, half finger to a finger maybe. But the head's pretty much gone. You can kind of see there's an oily-ish kind of film. Again, I'm going to blame that on the cocoa powder, I think. It's the only really ingredient that could have done that. My equipment and everything was pretty well clean and sanitized, so a little bit oily there. So, go ahead and smell this. Definitely get a little bit of chocolate. You do get a hint of some hops, but nothing that's beating you over the head crazy. Let me go ahead and give it a taste. It's pretty nice. Reminds me very much of the Left Hand Milk Stout, which is kind of what this clone is based off of. I took a clone of that recipe and changed some of the malts around to kind of favor more biscuity, kind of toasted malts. But it has a very Left Hand Milk Stout kind of taste to it. Unfortunately, I'm not really getting any sort of s'mores aspect. I really don't get the graham cracker and the vanilla. You definitely taste some chocolate. I mean, there's kind of a hint of cinnamon, and that's probably from the cinnamon honey grams we used. And I mean, there's a touch of vanilla, but you really got to search for it. I don't think if I knew it was there, I would call it out. And there's a bit of honey, and I'd be willing to bet that the honey is probably from the honey malt we used and not from the graham crackers, unfortunately. You know their taste here. Yeah, I mean, just really, unfortunately, you know, you wait all this time, and I'm going to say I'm a little disappointed. There really isn't much of the s'mores character to it, or definitely not as much as I would have liked to have tasted. So, in my overall opinion, I would say it's a fail in the s'mores stout capacity, but I think it's still a decent milk stout or a sweet stout. Like I said, it's very much kind of like a left-hand milk stout. I think, you know, pretty much following that recipe. You know, that was a pretty good idea. You know, for a good base milk stout, I think it passes for that. Well, I mean, that's, I think, why you kind of do the home brewing. You never really know what you're going to get. You try putting some recipes together. They're not always going to be home runs, but at least you go to bat and give it a shot. So, I think my overall opinion, I'm disappointed. I wouldn't brew the recipe again as written in an attempt for a s'more stout. You know, that's just, you know, being my honest opinion. I'd love to say, hey, it was awesome, I think I'm the greatest brewer ever, but good sweet stout, definitely a drinkable beer. I mean, I'm not afraid or embarrassed to share this with people. You know, it's not an utter failure, just not really the s'more stout I was hoping for. So, as I mentioned in the opening, I had my buddy Matt. He gave a BJCP kind of review, so I'm going to go over that with you, and maybe that'll help fill out a little bit and give you a little more details around it. So, BJCP guidelines, they go through aroma, appearance, flavor, mouthfeel, and overall. Each one kind of has different points. So for aroma, out of a total of 12 points, Matt rated a 9. His notes were, the aroma has some roasted chocolate, there's some vanilla as it warms, fruity with a touch of smoke. So 9 out of 12 for the aroma. That's not bad. The appearance, on a scale of 1 to 3, he gave it a 1. Low head retention, had a creamy brown, very opaque head. So as we saw, the head did disappear quite quick. No head retention. I would say no head retention. So, maybe if I could have got a half a point, he might have given me that, but no problem there. So on the flavor, out of a scale of 1 to 20, Matt rated it a 10. His notes were, had a roasted malt with dark fruit. Hops are present, but balanced towards the malts. The aftertaste is a bit smoky and charcoal, which I'd agree with. Now that I read that, I definitely kind of get that. And the very end notes of caramel, cinnamon, and licorice. So there you go, flavor 10 out of 20. So the mouthfeel, Matt gave it a 3 out of 5. Medium to light, really no noticeable alcohol. Creamy with a dry finish. Carbonation low to medium. I'd agree with all of those. Those are all pretty spot on. And overall, so the beer got a 6 out of 10. Notes. Good beer, but the yeast overpowers the subtle flavors that are hidden by the fruity esters. Could brew again with cleaner yeast, as well as some wheat for head retention. So that puts the beer 29 out of 50. That rates it at good. If you look at the scale of BJCP, 29 out of 50 is a good rating. So definitely a couple flaws. It's within style, but definitely could use some improvement. So I guess that kind of leaves it overall of the beer. Kind of what do we do? Because I did a lot of research. I went to Reddit, and I want to thank everybody on Reddit for all the great feedback and suggestions. I also went over to Homebrew Talk. I bounced some ideas off of Matt Gillespie. I bounced some ideas off Gina Malines from Black Cauldron Brewing. And, what do we do now? So I think one thing you could do, and as a home brewer, I try to avoid it. And, I know the verdict's out on whether you should or shouldn't use extracts, but they make some graham cracker extracts. They also have a marshmallow extract. So maybe, we can go with just the sweet stout based beer and add some extracts at brewing. I'm sorry, at bottling. That's the last thing I'd ever want to do. If I could get the flavors naturally without using, the oily kind of extracts, I would do that. But maybe this is a case where really the only way you're going to get that flavor is, to use some of those extracts. I know when people talk about pumpkin and brewing a clone of that, there's a thought out there that they use that graham cracker extract. In my reading along using graham cracker, the best case you could use it was in the mash. And I've read conflicting reports. You got to use, 2 or 3 boxes of it, or hey, I just used 1 box and I tasted it. We used 3 boxes. It was in the mash. I mean, I don't imagine in a 5-gallon batch with 3 boxes, if you don't taste it now, I don't think you're ever going to taste it in the mash. I mean, it's there, but I would be willing to bet that if I mashed without the graham cracker and just used the honey malt, I would probably still taste exactly what I'm tasting. The other route we could go is maybe trying to figure out a different way to mash the graham cracker, Maybe it's putting it in the boil. Maybe we can put it in a bag and kind of steep it, or, maybe sit it on secondary. I'm not quite sure. For the vanilla, I'm going to blame part of that on me. Is this the first time I ever used vanilla? And again, maybe it's a pretty ambitious batch for my first stout ever, let alone trying to nail all these other subtle flavors. So maybe I didn't cut the vanilla beans in half quite enough. I certainly didn't scrape out the insides. Again, I've read you didn't have to do that. So maybe next time I'm definitely going to do that and see if I can get a little more flavor out of it if I rebrew using that methodology. We could try to deconstruct what graham cracker is. I think it's like a wheat flour, and there's going to be some sugars. So maybe we could do some sort of flour and some brown sugars and kind of caramelize those up and use some honey malt. So there's a couple of different ways we could try to do this again. For me personally, I think right now I'm going to move on to some other recipes. I don't know if I'm going to rebrew this one, but I'd love to hear your feedback and comments. That's my favorite part of this show, and it's why I do this. I love hearing what you guys have to say, and I know I'm not right all the time or half the time. I'm a new home brewer, so I'd love to hear what you guys would have done differently. So, unfortunately, I think I missed the mark on this one. I think it's a great base recipe for a sweet stout. I think there's definitely some room for improvement on how to get that s'mores aspect. So, I'll leave it up to you guys. I'm looking forward to the comments, whether you want to hit it up on Reddit, we're going to have a post for this. Whether you want to hit us up on Homebrew Talk, we're going to have a post for this. Whether you want to post some comments in the YouTube area, whether you want to hit us up on Facebook, on Twitter, and email, however you want to do it, all those links will be at the end of the episode. So, I think that's going to conclude the brew. I'm going to take one more sip. Yeah, not a bad beer, not s'mores, fail in that capacity, but it's a good sweet stout. I'd recommend the recipe for that. So that's going to conclude the episode. I'm Preston. Thank you for watching. This is the Beer Chasers. We'll see you later.
Beer is good. Beer is good. Beer is good. And stop. Beer is good. Beer is good. Beer is good. Let's go drink some beer.